turn it over to Dennis here in a minute. With respect to the project, we had a real hard time coming up with a $500,000 project. So when you add those sources together, the borrow money and the grant money matched together, we've got about $500,000 in hand. So the challenge was, let's design a $500,000 project. That's what we talked about in the last couple of meetings. And that's what we needed Gateway to start crunching the numbers and looking hard at the design to see what that might entail. Unfortunately, despite our best efforts, Gateway's best efforts, and the pool designer's best effort, we could not find a project for $500,000 that was in the original recommendation. The bulk of the proposed improvements was redoing the zero depth entry area. That area was done in 1995. There are some changes to the ADA accessibility regulations so that it is no longer compliant with those requirements. Therefore, we couldn't even put a new piece of equipment in there if we wanted to because it wouldn't meet regulations. So that whole area needs to be redone. We could not find a way, Gateway could not find a way to get a $500,000 project. So what we're proposing is a new project, but it's recommended in the pool feasibility study, and that's a splash pad. We gave you, in your packet, you have a conceptual layout. You've got pictures of example splash pads. It's actually separate from the pool, and it has a separate filtration system. So what this would not affect any future efforts or ability to make any additional improvements to the main pool. So maybe you could talk about that project and how we got there and what it includes.
Yeah, and like John said, we went with some of the recommendations that we had. We looked at various possibilities. Splash pad was one possibility where one of the items that he brought up that was a necessity was to have more child-friendly items at the pool. The zero depth entry was one way to do that, but there was no way to do a zero depth entry within the $500,000 limit. The zero depth entry would be required because the depth of the current zero depth entry is too deep to current standards, as John had mentioned. So this was an alternative option, which has been done at multiple pools. I think, like he said, there were photos in there. What it would involve is multiple spray features, water coming out of the ground, items like that for the children, and construction. We also did add the ADA lifts to the actual main pool, so that would add an ADA accessibility to the main pool. However, to do anything for children in that main pool, we would be over that $500,000 limit. There would also be floatable features would be added to the main pool. That was an additional item that would be included in that first option. So it wouldn't just be the spray pad. And I do have an alternate drawing here from the original. Now, it wouldn't be both these sections. It would just be one of those two, and could be various items used between those two, various spray features.
Dennis, they also have your memo. I didn't point it out when I gave the introduction, but in your packet is a memo from Dennis that outlines the options. Maybe to walk through that.
Yeah. So the actual construction items, excavation and a footer system. Now that would involve choosing an area, and it would be away from the current main pool, so that in the future, if you did want to do a new zero depth entry or do renovations to that existing pool, this would not affect that. Whereas multiple other options that we looked at, just making small fixes to the pool, those would then be undone in future phases. A slab and a frost wall system would be required. Filtration, vault, chemical systems, again, totally separate filtration from the existing filtration system, so that if an accident occurred, you wouldn't have to shut down both at once. It would just be one filtration system could be shut down until it was cleaned. And then the spray and play features, which those could be chosen. There's a few examples on there, but those can be chosen throughout the design process. And then again, like I mentioned, the ADA lifts for the existing pool, which that would bring the existing pool would at least have some ADA compliance then. And then floatable features to the main pool, so you are adding something to the main pool. Now that would be for older children, since the main pool as it sits now is not code compliant with children's safety standards per
before Dennis goes into the option for replacement and filtration, I wanted to point out that the ADA lifts are important, but they're also critical for the funding agency. So remember, the original full project was redoing the whole zero depth so that it was accessible under current standards. So this would be a way to rehab's the wrong word, but essentially accessorize the existing pool to bring it into current compliance. So we are bringing the main pool into current compliance with regulations that are currently in place.
Correct.
So you want to highlight the filtration system. We did look at that. I think I mentioned it to you at the last meeting or through various phone conversations that we don't want to propose building on top of a system that may need to be dug up in a couple of years.
Exactly, and that's why this is listed in phase one, because it would be something that you would be undoing other items. If you were to do a zero depth entry and then tried to come back and redo the existing filtration system, you would have to dig up or excavate current work. Based on the report that was done in 2012 and items listed by the Department of Public Works, there's not necessarily an immediate need or something that's seen, but like John said, we want to make sure to put this item out there so that if it were to go down in the next few years, there would be that option out there to take care of it now as opposed to digging something up in 2 years after renovating the pool.
And we did put it on here too to highlight the fact that we went through a deliberative process from an operational standpoint, working with Rob and the guys who are familiar with the pool, seeing if there's any issues. Engineering standpoint, from a design standpoint, everybody generally agrees that we can likely rely on the existing system with a few, Rob has talked in the past about a backup.
We're looking for a backup motor.
For the pump. So a couple of add-ons here and there, but not a major overhaul is necessary.
Yeah, and so that would just include the replacement of the existing filtration system, mechanicals, and then also there were some areas within the pool deck that had been highlighted to be patched or fixed, which would be done under that option as well. And then that option was determined to be approximately $120,000. Then moving on to a potential phase 2 option if one of those first 2 phase 1 options were chosen, which again, as we looked at it, we were unable to find, or we were unable to bring this into a project that was within that $500,000 range. But it would be for the zero depth entry as was originally proposed in the study that was done a number of years back. Now this would be the base system, but it would have a new zero depth entry which would have a separate wading pool area so that it would be compliant with the child code. It would also have the proper grade so that it would be ADA compliant, and there would be a railing system set up with that. Spray and play features and various features again will be chosen during the design process, would be added to it. Here, I'll send this around now. This was actually from the original original report prepared. Now there are some areas along there that were alternates, but those are crossed out. That'll just give you an idea of kind of what you would be looking at. With that work, as they were developing the zero depth entry, the main pool body would be shifted as well because the existing wall that is in there would have to be shifted, and the main pool body would then be would meet USA competitive swimming standards. It would be the proper lengths for USA competitive swimming standards. And then during that process, the underground perimeter piping, which currently exists, would be removed for a stainless steel gutter system, which is the typical use for swimming pools nowadays. And then with that, there would be floatable features which would be added to the pool as well. Now that is kind of the bigger project and taking care of many of the items on the list, but again, it was unable to be found within the limits of the budget proposed, and that was seen at $1 million for that, roughly.
There's also alternate options at the end there that they've priced out. As in addition, in the pool funding scenario chart, there's a $1.5 million option. That would be the full project, which essentially the big difference is adding back in the bathhouse. So that'd be everything that was originally recommended to be at about $1.5 million.
And those alternate options would be able to be added on to any of the existing items with little to no damage to what is currently created. Other than the large flume slide would need to be repositioned from where the existing slide is currently.
One last piece of information to bring to your attention is on Covey, you also have a comprehensive list of all of the park recommendations from the park plan. We talked at prior meetings about the bigger picture, so what we did was take all of the recommendations from the parks plan, as well as the trail feasibility study that was done several months ago, put them all into one big spreadsheet, put some ballpark cost to it, so you can just get an idea of what those recommendations are and how much it would cost to implement them, again, from a bigger picture standpoint. So where we stand now with respect to the pool is we need some guidance with respect to the scope of the project to move forward. On your agenda is a motion to authorize Gateway to go ahead and proceed with the design. As we talked about, the construction schedule will be to build this fall. We need to get the thing designed and construction documents prepared between here and now, getting authorization to bid from you, ideally in late summer, to get the project under contract in time to get out there with bulldozers as soon as the pool closes. Time is of the essence. However, if we go with the smaller scope project, we probably have a little bit of time, so if you'd like to have a discussion tonight, ask whatever questions you have of Dennis and myself, and then consider that motion at your regular meeting 2 weeks from now. That could work as well.
So the first thing I'd ask council to talk about is, that John's laid out how we would fund the $500,000. As options B and C, the costs go up considerably. He has shared information about how we would likely fund that, and it's not easy. So, are there any minds around council about coming up with the money that would potentially phase the full project that was originally scoped? Anyone want to discuss that as a possibility, or come up with some aggressive terms about how we would finance it?
We're putting $100,000 every year towards that project, the park renovation project.
No, we did capital improvement planning
There's $100,000 there.
just this year, not every year.
I thought you just said we were planning to do that every year.
No, the recommendation is to fund the $250 of the borough's half. We do $100 this year and $100 next year.
And the other $50,000 coming from fundraising, which he said we've got, what, close to 20 there now. But if you were suggesting that we would attempt to do $100,000 each of the years, right, we would still be several years out to come up with the full amount.
We wouldn't be several years out if we went for a bond and we paid that bond with that $100,000 each year.
Oh, so that's what I mean, that's the aggressive funding I'm talking about, going out for a bond, right? That's what's on the table, whether council is of a mind to do that or not. Because that's what we would ultimately have to do, I believe, to hit the full project, right? Would be to borrow and then commit funds yearly to pay back.
Yes, that's in terms of what's guaranteed in a sense of funding that you have in place. I do want to add, though, at the bottom of the chart, there are potentially additional funding sources. So we are queued up and Gateway's ready to go, so now that we have all this information, to apply for another round of DCNR funding, which is due in a matter of days. I think it's Wednesday. So we're going to hurry up and get that in, although the hesitation there is we already have $350,000 of DCNR money we can't spend. So, I'm sure they're not sitting at home watching this video, but I certainly will have a conversation with DCNR that's realistic in saying, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to line up these phases. If we move forward with phase one now of $500,000, that's a standalone splash pad. We'd like to phase in the rest of the project. So here's our next phase. Here's our grant application to fund that. We're still going to need matching money for that money. So we'll also look at applying for more DCED money in June, but none of that's guaranteed. So in terms of what you know, what's in front of you is the funding we have in place, which is the two line items there at the bottom, the 250 and the 350, and then borough matching funds in the form of borrowing or budgeted.
So the whole project that was thought for, at the very beginning was 1.5 million is what is in here right now.
Yeah, inflation, I mean, those numbers are what, 2011?
2012.
And we have 600,000 that has been granted to us. So we're looking at coming up with the difference, yeah. So what is the downside of going for a bond, paying for it with the money in the capital fund?
That's not a question for me, it's a policy decision. If this council wants to borrow, then we borrow. There won't be a little bit of a downside from an engineering perspective, because that'd be a whole heck of a lot of design to do in the next couple of months, but they get it done. We figure out a way to get it done. We
Yeah.
probably, if that's the direction, I will say from a management standpoint, if that's the direction we'd like to go, if we get that decision sooner than later, because we gotta get the financing lined up, we gotta get them starting to design, like tomorrow.
I mean, Deb worked the numbers, and we're looking at an interest rate of 2.75. You know, looking at $5,000 a month to pay for the bond, I can't make the math work in my mind to give back granted money when we could just go for a bond. We have, 6% of our budget's in debt right now. It's very healthy. I think Deb said, we could go up to 12 million in debt. We're only, not even 2 million. So it's,
Yeah, if there's a question there, one of them might be that we're getting money back. I mean, that we're spending the DCD money that's gonna expire next June, we are spending this fall, every penny of it. Then the other DCNR money will be there and be there for 3 years. So if the borough would decide to move forward with additional grant monies or additional general fund monies, you could do another phase in the future. Understanding that that phase, though, at a minimum will be, what, 600, 750,000?
For that alternate phase, it was actually $1 million to go with, yeah.
Okay,
That-
so
that
it'll be
was
$1
for
million.
separate Splash pad and
Right.
then,
Yeah, so
splash
it's not
pad's totally
added.
separate, that wasn't with that, $1.5 million. Splash pad was just a totally separate option that we were able to come up with within, $500,000.
Right, so we'll have 350 of $1 million project. We'll apply for DCNR and DCED this year. Hopefully, maybe come up with another couple of 300,000, and maybe the borough's match is 300,000 or 400,000 next year or the year after. if you want to do it.
And to be clear, I mean, the reason why that's the case, right, is because you got the extension, right? Right, we were going to be giving.
You were
money
going to
back.
lose the money, yeah.
We were gonna lose the money if we couldn't match it immediately. And the only way to match it immediately would have been to go out, as you suggest, with a bond. But because we got the extension, that gives an additional 3 years to come up with the funding match.
No, the
Which,
extension was on DCED till just
Till-
next June.
okay,
We have to, we would have lost it, you would have lost it regardless, to be frank. It was due this June. There's no way you could have had a pool project. I mean, when I came on board in August, you would have never had a pool project designed and ready to be under construction before that grant was on expired.
so what's the grant then that we still have 3 years to match?
DCNR.
The DCNR one, okay.
I just, I look at the pool as a valuable resource for the borough, but in the pool and parks plan, it described a lot of different other deficiencies we have in terms of Noble Avenue, Linwood, Clearview, and the main park itself. So I think that we should sit and look at the bigger picture in terms of parks and recreation, not just fixate on the pool. That is a huge part of it. If we're going to borrow, and we decide as a policy that we're going to borrow, I think we have to look at all the parks and recreation. People need the parks and recreation. I believe that they want that type of thing, just like they want roads. But that draws the younger people in for parks and recreation. We're sitting on property down in the valley. We have not even had a discussion what to do with it. There could be some passive active recreation. The trail, the levee that runs along Chartiers Creek connects to, Stratton Park. Those things have been untapped. We have not looked at that stuff either. So I think that if there is going to be another round of funding or some more expenses thrown, be put out there, we should look at the big picture and not just get fixated, because all too often, we'll get the pole fixed, nothing else will get done. 20 years later, we'll have this same discussion, something will get fixed, nothing else will get done. And we're not revitalizing our assets to draw the community and the people into our community to keep them.
The other thing is though, I mean, there's such a big chunk of money for the pool. Once that's out of the way, then the council and the borough can focus on other systems in the park. And if we drag out the pool, at what point will it become, then those other things are just gonna be, pushed back and pushed back. And I think when you look at the park system in general, it's been neglected for so long. I think we need a push. I think we need to bust a hole through the neglect. To look more so at the bigger picture, but get possibly the pool out of the way so we can address the other issues with the park. And I'm talking about community support as well. The community can then focus on other areas of the park instead of having to focus on the pool for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years.
Look, I agree with you, but I believe that it all has to be at the same time. We all have to have that master plan to work towards an end goal. Because all too often we get one project done, people start getting tired and, worn, so that next project maybe gets done, but then when we need that third project, we don't have that same vigor. People on councils change, and there's not that same push to get it done. You know what I mean? So I think that it has to be a part of a whole big package in order to go forward. I mean, if it's the decision and the policy we're gonna make is to borrow money, then we have to look at the bigger picture. If the decision is to comprehensively put money into a capital budget for Parks and Recreation, we have to do that with an end goal in mind. Not just, okay, pool needs $1.5 million, let's do that. But the heck with all this other stuff. And thinking about the residents in general, you have to think of the population that we have, more walking trails, people, being more active in our community, more fields, people being here. I talked to Carlton Soccer doesn't have a field in Crafton. How many kids, our kids, are going to other communities to practice? We don't have those things here. So we have to start looking at that, keep our kids in Crafton. It's vital for them to be here, bring families back into our community to sell our community. So I think it's a big win-win if we look at the big picture. So in terms of dollars and cents, that's the decision we have to make.
I would like to see somebody from this council get together and maybe create a partnership with the school board. We have a great field down there that we are locked out of, that we cannot use for our children in our community. They go elsewhere to play soccer. The little Cougars are non-existent with brand new equipment sitting down at the athletic field. We are locked out of that property down there. Why can't we maybe team up with the school board and somehow come to some good resolution of using that field down there? The other thing, when I go to the park, I see a beautiful park down there. I don't see what you guys are seeing about, falling apart and need all these repairs of this big master plan. I am not supportive of borrowing money. I am not supportive of borrowing money for the pool. Gateway's worked hard to come up with a resolution. We talked about this. Mike, you weren't around at the budget time when we talked about the pool situation. And there was consensus in the room that we would do it over 2 phases so that, we could match some funds and get some grant money and not bury ourselves in a bond or borrowing money. And, we had decided then that we were going to try to do this in 2 phases. They came up with a great idea with this splash pad. And, I am not in favor of a bond or borrowing money or raising taxes. I think that, we need to come compliant. We need to do what these guys are suggesting and get this work done. And we should make that decision tonight, really, instead of putting it off any longer.
I've been active in the borough now with John since last August. I have an opportunity to actually tour the parks. the neighborhood parks as well as the main park. There's a lack of maintenance, it's been going on for a number of years. I think that mindset has changed. I think you'll see a vast improvement in maintenance tasks and crews with a designated parks crew that will be charged just to do maintenance and not keep with all the parks. The ball field that Mr. Crown was talking about, I have a price right now from a contractor to clear the trees along their first baseline, which is inhibiting those kids from playing there. I have a plan to go in and repair the outfield, the drainage system, and the infield to make that ball field at least accessible to anybody, the Crafton kids that want to use it.
But the point is, Rob, is the baseball fields, it's a long history. They went down to Meyer Middleton for, reasons as in the past, but there's no field. The baseball field's leaving the fences, dugouts, it doesn't justify, soccer or other sports playing down there. It's a baseball field.
Well, actually, the fields at the end of Ewing are unfortunately under the same condition as the baseball field in Crafton. They're not maintained to the point where they're playable. The athletic field, which was used by Crafton in my previous tenure here, was used for everything. The high school, the little Cougars, the soccer. So that field was used extensively for the residents of Crafton and the high school students. And what happened there when the decision of the high school or the school board to keep the Crafton kids out of there, I'm not sure what was involved in that. But if you're gonna do a full-blown bond, borrow money to upgrade your parks and your pool, you have to take a serious look at your roads. Because you can sit here and tell people are gonna move into Crafton Borough because of your enhancements of your parks and your pool. But looking at this list, I have 10 miles of brick streets with the highest rating being a 4, which is poor. I mean, you have 10 miles of brick streets in a borough, 3 miles of tertiary streets or alleys, and they're all in the point where they need reconstruction. If you look at my paper that I submitted to the borough and the Cubby, you can see the ratings of the streets, the borough's alleys, where every resident has garages and needs access to those. And your pavement, and your asphalt pavement streets, I haven't crunched the numbers yet about the Pazer system, the Gateway submits, but your asphalt streets also are in vast need of improvement. And this is because, one, maybe the budget that the taxpayers have, that they're taxed to do, isn't enough. And I'm not sure exactly that the borough needs to really, if you're gonna float a bond, take into consideration improvement of their streets. Because I know for a fact that people move into the borough, you can't get up down Belvedere Street because you crack your oil pan, they're gonna turn right away and move to some other neighborhood, not because of a pool, a walking trail, or a park. So if you're gonna float a bond, you need to really take into consideration a budget that actually, you should be doing anywhere from 3 to 4 miles of streets a year in the borough. You do less than a mile. And that's any best management practices, is you have to turn over your streets every 8 to 10 years. You don't do that, that hasn't been done. So if you're gonna increase parts in the pools, you have to take into consideration your streets. So if you float your bond, if the borough decides to do that, you need at least $1.2 million to catch up on your streets. You need a $977,000 minimum, so we'll give you 3.2 miles of streets that you're gonna repair. If you don't do that, then you're gonna keep falling farther behind, and you're gonna end up in the situation where you really don't wanna be. So I know you do about 0.76 miles. That's what your budget permits you to do in Crafton Borough. And that's just for asphalt paved. That doesn't take into consideration for brick streets. We can do so much in-house, doing brick repair with intersections and things that are come to the point where you need to do something today, not tomorrow, today. But in essence, if you're gonna float a bond, you take into consideration your streets too. Because if you don't have any way to get to those streets without damaging your car, I don't think you're gonna improve and increase your property values because of the enhancements of the parks and the pool. So just take into consideration, there's a fine line, the parks and the streets, you have to take a fine line and to see what you develop. So I'm just putting that out there in a couple words.
Yeah, so, I mean, let me make a couple of comments, right? I've always been of the mind that our road budget is grossly underfunded, right? Grossly. We put away, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the road tax is about $375,000 a year. I think I just heard you say you need to be closer to $900,000 to be actually fixing your streets at the recommended turnover of 8 to 10 years. So that's close to 2.5, if not 3 times underfunded, right? And I agree. I think that's something that we should seriously look at. as part of this discussion and is even is ancillary to this discussion, right? I mean, that has to get fixed. What I feel about the pool, I mean, I think it's an asset. I think it's an asset that's been underserved or under maintained. I think we need to do something, right? I like the fact that we've come up with one plan that doesn't limit us from doing something in the future, right? So we're giving some care and consideration to that pool. But what I'm unconvinced about, if we float a bond and say, hey, let's spend $1 million on the pool, what I'm